Woo! Just kidding. Hello, true crimerers. I thought I would do 10 murders that occurred on Halloween. This will basically just be a generic compilation list type thing. I have covered most of these cases over on my TikTok page, so if you're watching this on YouTube, I will try my best, if you give me some time, to put the links to all of those videos down below if you wanted to watch like the full stories on each of these. If you're watching this on TikTok, why aren't you watching me on YouTube? Go give me a subscription, huh? Link in my link tree, great. So, number 1, 1957. Peter Fabiano was murdered on his doorstep after he opened the door for what he thought was a trick-or-treater. Later, it would turn out that it was actually a hired hit woman who was hired by his wife's female lover. Yeah. So, the two women responsible, meaning the hit woman and the lover, they were both convicted but only got 5 years each and were both released after just a couple of years. His wife, to my knowledge, was never tried or charged with anything. Number 2, in 1981, Sister Tadia BENZ. She was stabbed, strangled, and sexually assaulted inside of their convent and was discovered by her fellow nuns a few hours later. Johnny Frank Garrett, who was a neighbor to the church, he would be charged with and convicted of her murder. He would end up being executed for this crime. There are some out there who believe that he is actually innocent. Halloween night, 1981 again. Ronald SISMAN and Elizabeth PLATZMAN. The man and woman were found beaten and shot to death inside their Manhattan apartment on Halloween night, 1981. The apartment was staged to look like a robbery took place as things were just thrown everywhere, but as it turns out, nothing was stolen. To this very day, the case is unsolved. It's Halloween night and people are trick-or-treating outside, so my dogs are barking. Sorry, I can't do anything about that. Please deal with it. Next up, 1998, KARL Jackson. He was shot and killed by a teenager after he had gotten back to his car and noticed that a group of teenagers had egged his car. So he reacted and started a confrontation with them. One of them, the 17-year-old, whose name was Curtis Sterling, pulled out a gun and shot him directly in the head, killing him instantly. The teenager would be convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Next up, Halloween night, 2005. A lot of people seem to forget that this particular case happened on Halloween, but it's a case near and dear to my heart, one that I talk about all the time. It's the namesake to my page. It is the murder of TERESA HALBACH. She was, of course, murdered on Halloween night 2005 after last being seen on the Avery compound in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin. The case obviously is shrouded in controversy, thinking that Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey were wrongfully convicted of her murder, which, of course, if you know me, I would agree. But technically, her case is solved. Next up, Halloween 2010. The LISKE House Murders. A man in his mid-20s, William LISKE Jr., would murder 3 of his own family members inside their home. His father, William Sr., his stepmother, Susan, and his stepbrother, Derek Griffin. He would end up pleading guilty to 3 counts of homicide and would be convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But then in 2015, he would end up ending his own life in his prison cell. Next, Halloween 1974. 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien had been poisoned to death by a poisoned pixie sticks. Originally, it was believed that a neighbor had poisoned some pixie sticks and had dispersed them amongst the kids in the neighborhood. But it would later turn out the answers were much, much closer to home. Timothy's own father, Ronald, had poisoned the pixie sticks with the idea of killing his own son. He had poisoned other sticks as well, including some neighbor kids and his own daughter, but Timothy was the only one to actually ingest it and die. Ronald was convicted of this murder, and he would be executed in 1984. Next up, Halloween 1992. Yoshihiro Hattori. He was a foreign exchange student in America, and he was supposed to be going to a Halloween party that night, but because he wasn't from here, he got confused by the directions, and he ended up knocking on the wrong house, the wrong door. Well, the owner of that house didn't like it so much, and the owner claimed that they were afraid for their life, so they opened fire on the young Hattori and shot him dead. The owner of the house, Rodney Pieris, well, he would be found not guilty because he used the castle doctrine to get off, meaning he was allowed to protect his home. Hattori, by the way, had nothing on him. No weapons, nothing. And he was walking away from the house. Next, Halloween 2004. Leslie Ann Mazzara and Adrian Insogna. The college students were murdered inside their apartment building, which they shared with a third roommate. Both women had been stabbed to death by a friend of one of their roommates, Eric Koppel. He never gave a motive. The girls weren't sexually assaulted. He just did it. And he would end up being convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. And finally, Halloween 1979, Shirley LEDFORD. Shirley LEDFORD was the final victim of the Toolbox killers, Roy Norris and Lawrence Bittaker. On Halloween night, they kidnapped her and they used their toolbox of torture to torture the poor girl before murdering her and then just dumping her body. Bittaker would end up getting sentenced to death, but he would die of natural causes in prison before they could execute him. And Norris would end up only being sentenced to 45 years to life, which means he could get paroled. And that is 10 murders that occurred on Halloween night. I hope you all had a pleasant Halloween and a safe Halloween. Make sure to check your kids' candy. You wouldn't want a drag queen to come out of one of them, huh? No, but seriously check their candy because, kids are poisoned, so be careful, yeah. All right, true crimerers, you spooky sons of guns. I'll see you for the next video. Ew, what? No.